I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Thank you for coming. Such a dreary old day, no sunshine, but thank you for getting out. I think it's going to be a great meeting. I think we're going to learn stuff that's going to help all of us and maybe help our counties to grow. I'm going to turn it over to our mayor, Mr. Brett Lashley, and let him tell you a little bit about what's going on.
Thank you, Kathy, and appreciate everyone being here today, especially good to see Mayor Mike Creasy over in Decatur County, or Representative Bruce Griffey here as well, and also this is being broadcast on Facebook Live, so for those that are tuning in via that venue, we appreciate all of your attention to this event. This is a very important event for Benton County, and I'm here to tell you kind of how we got here. And first of all, it started with the Benton County Industrial Board kind of taking the bold step of realizing that we needed to industrial develop Benton County. And a lot of times we would look at our industrial park, well, it's land, it's parcel, but how do you actually develop it? We look at our interstate, we look at certain assets in Benton County, but the question always comes out, well, we can talk about jobs and we can talk about creating a vibrant industry, but doing it is another step, and the complications of that. So the Benton County Industrial Board took on the challenge to, first of all, we need a plan. You know, the old, where there's no vision, the people perish. So the Industrial Board began discussing the value of bringing in someone with experience, especially to the rural economies, that could at least give us some type of roadmap of how we need to direct our efforts and our energies over the long-term vision. And so Representative Griffey and I guess we were two kind of newly elected officials a year ago. He and I and a couple other officials embarked to a trip to Columbus, Mississippi, where we discussed how do we get this done with a man named Joe Max Higgins Jr. Just Google him and it'll speak for himself. But Joe Max has had a vision many years ago in Columbus, Mississippi, and it was very rural and the economy was declining, and he embraced a strategic plan brought forth by Polycom, and Mr. Bill Fruit was instrumental in how they got developed. So we don't want to recreate the wheel. We left with that meeting knowing that Polycom was a great resource to turn to. I brought that to the Benton County Industrial Board. They jumped immediately on it and felt like that was a great first step for Benton County to begin looking over the long term of how it should grow and also how it should partner. So I believe that you'll find today's presentation very informative, very engaging. My hat's off to the Benton County Industrial Board for again putting forth the efforts, the financial support to bring this endeavor on, and I'm excited about the future of where we can go after today. I also want to thank the Benton County Camden Chamber of Commerce for helping to organize this event, putting it together and making the phone calls and getting the venue and basically making all this come to fruition today. I thank all the Benton County officials and elected leaders, community leaders, business leaders around the region, and also Benton County for attending this as well. So I will turn this back over to Chairman Hoot, and she will give you an introduction to our speaker today. Thank you.
Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Mr. William H. Fruit, for the past 20 years, has served as an economic development consultant for communities throughout the United States. He is the president of Polycom Corporation, a firm located in Palm City, Florida, which specializes in studying the dynamics of local economies. Polycom determines if any economy is growing or declining, what is causing this to happen, and offers ideas and solutions to improve the situation. Mr. Fruit has personally evaluated the data for more than 800 local economies in the United States, created more than 200 economic and community studies, and has provided presentations and workshops for state and national associations and community forums in 40 states. Prior to founding Polycom from 1988 to 1955, Mr. Frith served as a vice president of a major industrial land development company, directing the development and marketing of 500-acre corporate park in West Palm Beach, Florida. Previously, he was president of the Business Development Board of Palm Beach County, and during that tenure was named Florida's Economic Development Professional of the Year in 1987. From 1980 to 1984, Bill served in full-time capacity of mayor of Tiffin, Ohio. During this time, he was named one of the 5 outstanding young men in Ohio and was heavily involved in economic and community development statewide. He received the bachelor's degree and a bachelor and master of arts degrees from Bowling Green State University and has been recognized by Florida's Administrative Court as an expert witness regarding local economies. Mr. Bill Frith.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be here today. I'm going to set my timer so that when I go over time, hey, it's a pleasure for me to return to Benton County. I've been here on 2 visits earlier to do research, to examine the area, to meet people, and I'm delighted to see so many people turn out today. I know it's difficult to take off time from work to come to listen to an economics presentation. But today what we're going to do, we're going to review how a local economy works, the flow of money into an area, the flow of money out, and what causes that to happen. We're going to discuss the Benton County economy to see how it compares to other areas. Is it growing or declining? We'll examine issues needed to build a local economy here in Benton County. Identify the steps needed to be taken by the community to cause economic growth. And then we're going to have a break and then have a discussion with you about all the issues that I've talked about and issues that I haven't, and try to answer all your questions so the county can move ahead. Now, my role in this is to share with you my assessment of the current situation and to make recommendations to you for the future. Your role is to look at my assessment and agree with it or not agree with it, look at my recommendations and agree with all of them, some of them or none of them. Because after I leave today, the ball will be in your hands, and whether or not you move forward will be the decision made by the community at large. Now, I got my first lesson on how local economies work when I was first elected mayor of Tiffin, Ohio. Has anybody ever been to Tiffin? No, it doesn't surprise me. Located in northwest Ohio, and this is back in 1980. I was 27 years old, it was a full-time job, strong mayor form of government. And if you remember, some of you are old enough too, the 1980 was not a good year, nationally, economically, and it was not for my area. Seneca County, Tiffin was the county seat, had a real 12% unemployment. Factories were closing, retail stores were closing, and my first legal obligation was to prepare a balanced budget for this municipal corporation. So I worked on this budget, and I'm good with numbers. And after a firecracker session with our city council to talk about all the cuts we had to make in order to survive, I met with one of our the most prominent political gadfly in our community. Now, this fellow had lived in town all his life. He had done everything in life. He was 90 years old or something, 110 years old. We didn't know for sure. He attended every city council meeting, spoke at every issue of every city council meeting. Sometimes that becomes irritating. And there might be 1 or 2 people like that in your community. Every now and then these folks are right. So I asked him the question, so what is wrong with our economy? Well, he looked me square in the eye and said, there's a hole in the bucket, Mr. Mayor. I said, what? There's a hole in the bucket, and there's more money leaking out than what's coming in on top. At that point, all my study of political and economic theory began to crystallize on how local economies work. Because you see, all the wealth of your community is in a bucket. It gets sloshed around. It goes from person to person, business to business, up and down, all around. Money and wealth is like a hive of bees following the path of a three-dimensional spider web within a local economy as it gets mixed and churned. But there's a problem. There's a hole in the bucket, and the wealth of a community is being drained from it. Every time you purchase an automobile, a good share of that money goes back to Nashville or Michigan or Tokyo, wherever the car was made. Every time you go on vacation, make your life insurance premium payment, money leaves your economy and returns to those economies in which the product was manufactured or the service performed. The wealth of a community is constantly being drained from it, is being consumed. Eventually it will all go away, unless, of course, the community imports new, rejuvenating wealth, which enters your bucket, is mixed and churned, goes back and forth all around until it is eventually consumed. Money enters an economy principally by way of the business activity of your primary employers. They're the ones that sell their goods or their services outside of your community and therefore import wealth to the area. The primary or contributory industries import the money. Typically, only about 5% of the business enterprises are primary in nature. Typically, they employ about 25% of the workforce. The consumptive or dependent industries consume this wealth. The consumptive industries can only grow as great as the amount of money imported by the primary businesses. The growth and size of an economy depends upon how much money is being imported, and the quality of an economy depends upon the wages paid by the primary industries. Now, this activity that goes on within this bucket of wealth can be measured. It's called economic impact. It's complicated formulas, but we're able to determine the number of jobs and the path of the money from a typical primary employer. It's called an economic impact study. Now, this is the result of an economic impact study that I did for a community in Florida, based upon Florida's laws, Florida's tax system, for a 500-job pharmaceutical manufacturer that is going to have an average wage of $75,000 a year within this factory. When that company enters the economy, within about 18 months of their total hire, another 1,900 jobs will be created. These will be in eating and drinking places, healthcare, wholesaling, professional services, real estate, general services, and more than 300 jobs in construction. Another 1,900 jobs are created, but there's a monetary impact also. This business enterprise would create more than $164 million of community payrolls, enough money to support 1,900 households. $17 million a year annually would be generated in state and local taxes. It'll create more than $109 million of taxable retail sales. This is the economic impact of this employer, and within each industrial sector, the impact varies. And I need to sort of bring this up right now. This is based upon Florida's laws and the Florida community. But it's very similar to the economic impact of commuers across the river. Actually, commuers would probably be greater than this because I think their employment is greater than that. And this gives you an idea, and Tennessee tax laws are very similar. You don't have state and city income taxes. Very similar to this impact. And I want to bring up this issue. For every beginning, there is an ending. I was in Plainview, Texas, Hale County, did an economic plan for them, had a community meeting like this to present the plan to them. Now, Hale County, Plainview, Texas, is south of Amarillo, north of Lubbock, 3 exits on an interstate. A depressed economy, had not grown for a long time. They had 2 major primary employers. Walmart Distribution Center, the first one ever built by Walmart, that employed about 800 people, and ConAgra, that employed 2,500 people at a meat plant. So, get the presentation, and a fellow stands up in the back and says, "We don't need this economic development. We've got Walmart, we've got ConAgra, we've got cotton, we don't need this stuff. I said, well, you cannot always assume your major employers will be there. Now, this was in November of a certain year. On February 1, ConAgra announced they were closing the facility in 28 days. On March 1, 2,500 people didn't have a job. And there were people who thought I knew that was coming. I did not. Never assume your major employer will always be there. That is a classic mistake made by small communities. So, there are, the federal government defines these buckets of metropolitan area. Have to have a city of 50,000 people. Usually they are multiple counties. But there are 551 micropolitan areas. These are smaller economies. They have to have a town of 10,000 people. Typically they are one county. It's where preponderance of the people live and work, earn and spend. I rank all of them for economic strength, which is the long-term tendency for an area to consistently grow in size and quality. I look at 23 different factors and measure them for consistency, size, and quality. And since 1997, I have published economic strength rankings. Now, these are the rankings for the 10 strongest metropolitan areas for 2019. Nashville is the strongest metropolitan area economy in the country. They're always in the top 10. This fluctuates a little bit every year on the rankings, but out through San Diego, Indianapolis, Raleigh, Atlanta. These are the 10 weakest metropolitan areas. I've been to 5 of these areas, Bay City. These are all tough areas. They've been on gradual or rapid decline for an extended period of time. These are the 10 strongest micropolitan areas, which is very much like what Benton County is. Benton County, if it had a contained economy and had a town of 10,000 people, would likely qualify as a micropolitan area. But Bozeman, Summit Park, Worcester, Ohio, I've done a lot of work in Worcester, going down here to Oxford, Mississippi. These areas have had rapid, consistent growth for an extended period of time. And these are the weakest small economies in the country. These are economic disasters. They are just terrible situations. These are the weakest economies in the nation, whether it's micro or metropolitan area, and they've had a very difficult time, probably for 30 years. So, let's take a quick look at Benton County's economy. Look at your data. I compared it to the 551 micropolitan areas because it's a fair comparison. And I've done certain different rankings, such as, here's a ranking for the actual amounts in 2017 for population. If you were a micropolitan area, you would be the 544th largest. So your population is actually greater than about 7 micropolitan areas. Your average annual wages are ranked 536th. And this is back in 2007, it's also pretty slow. Per capita personal income is ranked 479. Your government transfers are the 33rd highest in the country. Your per capita Medicare is the 6th highest in the country. And that is because you have a high percentage of retirement age individuals living in the county. You're roughly 23% of the population over the age of 65. Nationally, it's about 17. In Florida, we have communities that are at 34%. But your transfers for Medicare and retirement, which is principally Social Security, are some of the highest in the country. So when we ask what is the largest inflow, the primary industry in Benton County, guess what it is? It's Social Security and Medicare. It's the greatest source of money flowing into the county. What bothers me a little bit is relatively high welfare. It's in the top 20% of welfare costs, per capita welfare. So let's look at population now. And what we have here is a relative chart that going back to 2002, we measure, and I compared you to the 10 strongest and the 10 weakest micropolitan areas. This is the average of population growth for those 10 strongest areas. This is the average for the population growth for those 10 weakest areas. And this is 2002 to 2017, and here's Benton County. Flatlining, and then basically having population decline on average for the last 10 years. I calculated the percentages for this 10-year period, 2008 to 2017. The nation grew at 0.8% per year. Tennessee was about the same, which is the 20th fastest among the 50 states. Benton County lost population, and these are the rankings against the 551 micros. Carroll County lost population, Decatur broke even, Henderson County gained a little bit, Henry County gained a little bit, and Humphrey is virtually the same in population. So all these counties really were far behind what the state of Tennessee did in population growth. Look at your retail sales, which is an indication of the amount of money flowing in and the size of the economy. And this is a little confusing here. These are the actual retail sales beginning 1999 through 2018 for these 6 counties. Here is Decatur County, basically flatlining, not increasing at all in retail sales. Benton County's right here, went up a little bit in 2007, came back down, but it has flatlined for almost 8 years. Humphreys County went up, stayed the same, went down, but has over a 3 or 4 year period has increased. This is Carroll County, flatlining for almost 10 years. Henderson County, up and down. It's strange we have these fluctuations in retail sales. That isn't particularly normal. But here is Henry County. Henry County's had some reasonably good growth in retail sales. This is a nice number. Here are the percentages. The average annual increase in Tennessee is 2.1%. Benton County only 0.8%. This is a 10-year average. Carroll County lost, Decatur lost, Henderson County modest increase. Humphreys County a 2% increase. Rutherford and Davison, 2 dynamic counties. But the important thing is basically your per capita retail sales. Is your state average. When we go down to Benton County, it's 64% of the state. Carroll's only 48%, 52%, 68%. Henry County's 160% of the state average. And Davison and Rutherford are pretty high. Now, retail is kind of funny stuff. Many retail establishments need a minimum population base in order to survive. None of these 4 counties of Carroll, Benton, Decatur, Henderson have a population base that supports most retailing. But Henry County does. And so there is a great deal of leakage going from Benton County northward to Henry for retail spending. That is one of the reasons why your per capita is so low and why retail sales hasn't grown. The other reason is you've had a declining economy for the last 10 years. So let's visually look at employment growth, job growth. I compared your relative job growth to the 10 strongest and 10 weakest micropolitan areas. And here's these 10 strongest areas, very dynamic. Here's the job growth of the 10 weakest, those absolutely terrible situations, weakest economies. And here's Benton County. Flatlining went back up, but the trend line is similar to the weakest economies in the country. When we look at the actual job growth, the nation over this 10-year period grew at 0.9% on average. Tennessee was 0.8%, which is the 16th fastest among the states. Benton County's job growth is 4.43, but you can look at Benton, Carroll, Decatur, and Henderson, all average job loss each year for that 10-year period. Henry County grew at 0.1%, and Humphreys also basically broke even. But we certainly have 4 counties here that are very similar economically, and all have been on gradual decline for an extended period of time. Let's talk a little bit about the quality of an economy and quality growth. Now, in order to do this, we have to examine what I call the great myth. And the great myth is any new job will help the economy. I've heard this all my life, especially when I was mayor of Tiffin, when we had 12% unemployment. Create any kind of job. Any job will help us. But in my study of local economies, I have found that this is not true. So to understand quality economic growth, we need to examine the game of baseball. Baseball will teach us the lesson on quality economies. Let me show you what I mean. Suppose you're on a baseball team, but actually this is a softball team, because these are batting averages. You don't have batting averages like this in baseball, you have them in softball. So you have, this is your roster. You've got a 760 hitter, a 630 batter, a 560 hitter. You have some really good players. You also have some scrubs, 243, 220, 181. But your team batting average is 407. That's really good. You have a strong team. Now suppose your sister calls you up and says, hey look, my two sons, your two nephews can't find work. I want you to put them on your softball team. And you ask the question, are they any good? And you go, she said, no, they're not any good, but they got to have a job. Put them on the team. All right. Well, in this team, in this league, everybody has to play. And you have these two players, and you're right, they weren't any good. One bats 220, 181. But everyone plays. Consequently, by adding the weak players to your team batting average went from 407 down to 369. The team got a little bit bigger, but the team got weaker. Suppose you like this idea of having a lot of players on your team. So you decide to trade your best player, your 760 hitter, for 3 players that bat 220. You make the trade, you got the biggest roster now in the league. However, by losing your best player and adding these 3 weak players, the quality of your team declined. Let's go back to the beginning. Suppose your 2 best players' contract expired. You forgot all about it. You never renewed it. They got on a bus to go to Albuquerque to play for that team last night. So you don't even have 9 players on your roster, but you have to have 9. So when they're supposed to come to the plate, you have 2 automatic outs. Now, as a result of them leaving the team, your team batting average has a volatile decline of 407 down to 252. A volatile decline in the quality of your team. Well, this is baseball, softball. What's this have to do with local economy? Well, these are actually average earnings per worker or wages for a community. And in this community, they maintain an average, a ratio of high wage jobs to low wage jobs, maintaining a high average for the area. In this community, they created more low wage jobs relative to high wage jobs, causing a dilution in the quality of the economy. In this economy, they lost high-wage jobs and created a whole bunch of low-wage jobs. The economy got bigger, but the quality of the economy declined. This is very much like what's happened in the United States of America over the last 20 years, that we lost the high-wage jobs, but created a whole bunch of low-wage service and retail jobs. And in this economy, they lost their high-wage jobs so fast, there wasn't even enough money floating around to cause the low-wage jobs to form. I researched and looked at the 25 strongest and 25 weakest metropolitan areas and discovered that over a 10-year period, the strongest areas, that 33% of all the new jobs created in those areas made a wage higher than their average wage. And the weakest economies, they had a net loss of their high wage jobs. So we talk about the quality of the economy, we talk about what people earn. I don't make any apologies for that. As a Flagstaff, Arizona, doing a community program like this, I'm talking about what people earn, and some bird stands up in the back of the room, starts yelling and screaming at me, my quality of life doesn't depend upon money. You keep talking about money. There's more important things in life than money. Why do you keep talking about money? Hey, fella, chill on. First of all, this is the economics presentation. Of course I'm talking about money. And there's nothing more important than money for the things money's intended. Money has purchased better housing, better food, a more secure retirement, better health care, more leisure time than poverty ever has. And so when we talk about the quality of an economy, we talk about what people earn, because that determines their economic quality of life. And so there's a lot of different ways to measure this. One way to measure it is the percentage of the national wage your annual earnings is. Now, you don't have to be at the national average because cost of living is different. San Francisco's higher than Albuquerque, higher than Des Moines, Iowa. And so, but if you're at 80% of the national average wage and you go to 81, then you've improved in quality. If you go down to 79, you've declined in quality. But the average wage needs to be at least high enough so that a household can be formed and they can live comfortably. So let's compare Benton County's percentage of the national wage to the 10 strongest and 10 weakest micropolitan areas. Here's your 10 strongest, and over this 9-year period, they gained. Here are the 10 weakest economies in the country, and here's Benton County. The average annual earnings of Benton County are lower than the weakest rural small economies in the country, and this is a problem. Just lack of spending power, the lack of earnings, has caused basically the depressed economy that we have. So, when we look at these wages, the United States average in 2017 was $60,000. Tennessee was $56,000, the 20th highest. Benton County ranked 536 out of 551 areas. Carroll County 510, Decatur County 502, Henderson County 427, and Humphreys County 54th highest. And that's because they had that high wage industry in that county that brings up their county wage. So, how do we improve the local economy? It's really simple. Create more primary industry jobs that pay a wage higher than the area average wage. And when we do this, a dynamic activity begins. Suppose a company is going to move into an area and they plan on hiring 100 people and pay them $65,000 a year on average. Now, people are paid in direct proportion to their skill and their value. They will look at the area and say, okay, I need 100 people that have the aptitude and skills to be worth $65,000. They won't go out here because they can't bring people down. What they do is look at this rung on the ladder at the 55s. Say, okay, I can get 100 people from the 55s, train them, and bring them up here. And when that happens, a vacuum forms. And this vacuum forms at the 55 rung. The 55 employer has to then look for replacements, and they typically pull from the 45 because they have the aptitude and skills to work here. Then the 45s pull up from the 35, and the 35s pull up from the 25, and then eventually 100 people are sucked into the workforce because of this vacuum. By the presence of one 100 job high wage employer, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 people have improved their economic quality of life because of advancement and climbing these rungs of the ladder. So, when we look at Benton County, we've done good study. We know that the economy's been on decline. Projections show that if you don't do anything, then the jobs will continue to decline over the next 10 to 15 years. Retail sales will actually decline already. They haven't kept up with inflation. They're 10% behind inflation right now, so even though they're the same amount of money 10 years ago, the value is 10% less. Retail sales will decline. Population will actually decline. Population will accelerate because the young people are going to have to keep moving away in order to find jobs. So the economic future, if you do nothing, is very bleak. Frankly, the burden of the cost of government is going to grow on retirement age individuals. I think that of these 4 counties, that you're going to have to consolidate some governments. You won't be able to afford government 10, 15, 20 years from now because the tax base won't be there if you sit back and do nothing. So I came up with 2 major recommendations. Number 1, you have to create a well-funded, professionally managed regional economic development organization that will implement a comprehensive economic development program, and you need to create a major employment center, an industrial park that should be immediately adjacent to Interstate 40. Let's explore this. Primary industries, primary companies have a long list of things that they need in order to run their businesses. They need labor, they need suppliers, they need a whole bunch of stuff. And so when they go into an area or examine an area, they look at this long list of stuff to see whether or not the community can provide it. Let's take a look at this example. Suppose you're sitting at home one day about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're getting ready for dinner and you discover you don't have any milk for the kids. All you need is milk. You're going to run all the way out to the supermarket, you don't know, but the corner store is right there. Now, the corner store doesn't have a lot of stuff, but they do have a gallon of milk. And so to buy a gallon of milk, you go down to the corner store. That doesn't have a lot of stuff, but it's got a couple of things that you need. Now, suppose, however, you're sitting at home one day and you discover, oh my goodness, I don't have any food for dinner for everybody. You got to go out and try to buy food for one dinner. Well, instead, the corner store doesn't have enough food for a dinner. So what you do, you go to the supermarket. The supermarket's bigger. It has everything you need for a simple dinner. You can buy the meat, the potatoes, and the milk and everything else, and you're done. The supermarket has everything. Now suppose, as of last week, you go crazy and you decide to invite everyone in your family, extended family, their extended family, for Thanksgiving dinner. You invite crazy Uncle Benny, your father, your mother, all your brothers and sisters, all their kids' kids, everybody. You have this huge crowd coming for Thanksgiving dinner. And you're looking around all the stuff you're going to have to get. You're going to have to get turkeys and hams and pecans and pecans, both. You're going to have to get those foil roasting pans. You're going to have to get special spices. You're going to have, but the supermarket doesn't have everything you're going to need. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to what's known as the Super Duper supermarket. This place is huge. Now it's a little greater distance to get to. It's 1 million square feet. It has everything anyone would ever want to buy for food, buy to prepare food, and even stuff you never knew even existed that would help you with this task. It's one stop. It has everything you're going to need. Benton County is the corner store. Benton County has a handful of things, not many, that would be on the list of things for a primary employer. By combining these 4 counties, you actually create a supermarket. So you have a large number, most of the things that most primary employers would need to locate to an area. And by the way, let me just go back. The Super Duper supermarket applies to economic development, obviously. Madison, Wisconsin, Dade County, the capital. Very dynamic economy. About 500,000 people live in Dade County. But they found they were losing projects. And so what happened is that they merged in a region with 4 adjoining counties. And by doing that, their population went over 1 million. That was important because the cutoff population for many corporate headquarters site selectors is 1 million people. But by forming this region, which is now a 5-county region, they have multiple industrial parks, they have a larger workforce, and they're able to market. They became a super duper supermarket. So right now, Benton County is the corner store. Here we can become a supermarket. The power of the region, that the resources to implement a comprehensive economic development program. Not one of the single counties can do this. Joining together, you can indeed become competitive. Just by looking at population alone. We have the population of Benton. Add them all together, that's 83,000 people, marketable population. That makes this region, when compared to the 551 micros, the 61st largest in population. When we look at workforce, by combining the workforce, there are 42,000 people working, living in the jobs who work. 70% of them live in the region. And this is an economic linkage that the 4 counties have. Also has a geographic linkage. So this is this commuting pattern among the 4 counties. A lot of cross-pollination going on. and then some go out to other areas. So let's look at what site selectors, what corporations would want to have, and whether or not the region might be able to do and what you have to do this. 10 characteristics of a strong economy. The principal reason why I do my economic strength rankings is to look at the strong economies and see what they're doing. Number one, they are diversified economies. That means they have multiple primary industries feeding their bucket of wealth. If one goes down, it doesn't cause an economic disaster. They are not dependent upon one employer or one industrial sector. As a result of that, the flow of money is very continuous. Number two, geographic location. I'm also always asked, don't you have to be in a specific state or region to have a strong economy? Well, I looked at the 50 strongest micropolitan areas, and they are scattered all around the United States. There is no geographic relationship to the strongest areas. But when we look at the 50 weakest micros, they are clustered in the industrial South and New Mexico. And there's reasons why New Mexico's like it. It's an entitlement poverty state. There's a couple weak economies here. So the answer is no. A strong economy can be anywhere. They don't have to be in a particular state. And Tennessee is a very favorable state for site selectors and relocation. They are able to supply those needs of the primary companies. And there's a whole long list of needs that affect the profitability of a primary employer, whether they're a manufacturer or a corporate headquarters or a data center. I've listed 15 of them here. This list goes to probably 50 line items that they examine to see whether or not the community affects their costs. These are geographic economic issues. The strongest economies have satisfied, to the best of their ability, these geographic economic issues. Number 4, cost reduction programs. This is also called business incentives. They're out there. State of Tennessee has them. Most communities have them. There's been a lot of foolishness by communities and states on giving incentives. There's been some really dumb ones, granted, but it's part of the marketplace today, and there are indeed safeguards that can be put into the incentive program. Monday, before I came down here, I got a call from a community that a company is requesting a certain incentive package. They want me to evaluate the economic benefit of giving them what they want. In the past, I know this area, this county, and they were just giving it to them. My preliminary examination is that, no, they're asking for too much and you should deny it. But we have to give these incentives. Number 5, multiple transportation systems. And these affect the profitability. Interstate highways, commercial airport, rail, and port. Now obviously you have interstate highway, and I'm going to talk a little bit about highways in just a second. You don't have a commercial airport, you're not going to get one. Typically for corporate headquarters, the maximum distance is 60-minute drive. Nashville will be your airport. I know Jackson's trying to do an airport, but you may want to have commercial air traffic, but wanting it and getting in are two different things because it is a market-driven thing. So we don't score well there. Rail, 2 counties of the region have rail served. Now you don't have a shore port, but you certainly have the opportunity for a barge port. And that would be very important, by the way. You have that ability to do that, and that's market demand. If there's a market demand for a barge port, one can be put in this area, probably over in Humphreys County. But when we look at the highway system, there's 2 issues for employers. Number 1 is the internal highway traffic, and that's important for commuting. The typical company wants its workforce to live within 30 minutes of the facility. So when we look at this in a terrible map, it's the only one I could really get. We've got a nice 4-lane artery coming down here.
Highway 22.
All the way down to Lexington. We've got 4 lanes going from Lexington over to Parsons. We've got partial 70 widened. But if we can widen 641 all the way down to East Parsons, maybe Decaturville, and finish off widening here along with I-40. This is a beautiful internal highway system for community work. And this would be a priority, to get this widened, determine whether or not 70 should be widened to finish. But that would give us north-south, east-west, multiple commuting arteries. Let me just tell you a tale of two cities. Let me double check my time. I certainly don't want to bore you too long here. Oh, I've got to tell a story, I think. I'll tell you a story about two cities. This goes to two issues, transportation and community attitude. I was mayor of Tiffin, Ohio, and a bordering next county over is Findlay, Ohio. They are competitive city. And so the story basically is, this is Ohio, in case you've never been there. Tiffin is here, Findlay is here. Let's zoom in on this. Here's Tiffin, here's Seneca County, 60,000 people. Here is Findlay, which is in Hancock County. Now, back when they were building the Ohio Turnpike, just before the interstate highway system, which is now Interstate 90 and 80, this is the Ohio Turnpike. The route for the turnpike was supposed to come down here, go down, let me get over here. Here's Fremont, it's supposed to go between Fremont and Tiffin, provide each one of us an exit, swing up like this, and then go over to Cleveland. Wait a minute, the community leader said, we don't want growth. We don't want change. We don't want that turnpike coming into Seneca County and near Tiffin. So they fought it. Guess what? I don't care. You don't want it? We won't put it there. It'd be cheaper for us to take it on the north side of Fremont. Then the interstate highway plan came out. Interstate 75 was supposed to come down here, wobble this way, provide Findlay and Tiffin an exit. Wait a minute, we don't want growth, we don't want change, we don't want all that stuff to come in here. No. Well, fine, we'll just move it on the other side of Findlay and continue. When I was elected mayor in 1980, Tiffin the county seat. Seneca County was the only county in the state of Ohio that did not have a single piece of 4-lane roadway in it. Things changed. At that time, in 1980, 28,000 people lived in Findlay, 23,005 in Tiffin. In 2018, 41,000 people. Tiffin's population has dropped 5,000 people. They're the 23rd strongest small economy. Tiffin's right for 18. And the sad thing is all those community leaders who fought change, who fought growth, are dead and gone. And the people living there have to live with their decisions. Because there's no way the state's ever going to build 4-lane roads through Seneca County. So, higher education. Higher education engaged in economic development more and more and more. For the last 15 to 20 years, especially the last 10 years, education has been coming about. Research universities, a 4-year university with graduate studies, these are important because they link with private sector companies, cause employment to grow, products to be made in an efficient manner, and help cause economic growth. Community college and technical school. I highlight community college because now, as never before, community colleges are directly involved in the local economic development program. And they do it for several reasons. But the principal reason, the first reason, is training the workers. I've been to communities where the community college just has this wonderful outreach program where they go and visit all the major primary employers and the small ones too, talk with them. What do you need? Well, we're going to need 3 welders in about 4 months. All this stuff is put into the pipeline. The training is available. I've been to communities where the factories have their training in the community college. Their machines are all there. All this is happening. The second is that the community college also develops a curriculum that is associated with the future needs of their labor, whether it's in computers or lab testing and things like that. The community college today is one of the, more than the 4-year universities, is a catalyst for economic growth in communities throughout the United States. And this is a project we have to address in Benton County. And the technical school goes right with it because it goes along with worker training. Number 7, a characteristic is they have an aggressive, well-financed economic development organization. Now, economic development is basically a process designed to create growth and prosperity within a community. It's what we're here to talk about. And there are 3 basic programs, along with all the stuff of trying to help build the economic development infrastructure. These are the 3 basic programs: an existing industry program, a recruitment program, and a startup program. Now, there are rules to economic development. Here's rule number 1. Our existing companies are more important than companies that have yet to move here. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. If you don't think existing companies are more important than companies that have yet to move here, read rule 1 again. Your existing companies are the foundation for your economy, whether or not they're growing or expanding, but they're here. It is much easier to cause them to expand than it is to recruit a new company to move here. And so the existing industry program is the single most important thing a community should do. It's also relatively the cheapest thing to do. And what it is, it's an outreach program to your primary employers. You got more than you think. You think you got the big ones. But I've been able to identify within the region at least 100 primary employers that are in the 4-county area. Some of these may have 10 workers, 2 workers, 15 workers. I was in Corpus Christi, did a plan for them. And I said, you know, in your community, you've got about 200 software developers in companies. 200 people working in software development. Now we have software developers. Yes, you do. You got software going on here. No, we don't. Well, I said, well, what's your retention program? Well, we do this and this and such. This is what you do. You go to all your office buildings and start walking up and down the hallways and looking for company names. Walk in and ask, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Well, we started this company about 6 years ago. We developed software for the oil industry, and we create this stuff. And we said, they didn't even know they existed. I was in Nevada. I can't even remember the county. It's east of the capital, Carson City, rural county. I did a 5-county plan there for them region. And I then talked to the county commissioner. I said, do you know you have about 100 high-wage engineers here? And the county commissioner looked at me. This guy from Florida, I think I was a kid compared to them, as old as they were. But he didn't know what he was talking about. You don't have 100 engineers here earning $100,000. Yes, you do. It's in the data. They're somewhere around here somewhere. Anyway, I leave town, and about 2 weeks later, I get a call from the economic developer. He says, hey, look, we found your 100 workers. I said, what are you talking about? Well, I'm driving down the 2-lane road back to Carson City, and I see this dirt road, a gravel road going in between 2 mountains. I said, but it's well used. So I drove down it and ran to a gate. The gate says, private entry Ford Motor Company. And what had happened is that Ford had moved their vehicle test track from Dearborn to between 2 mountains in Nevada because Chevy and these other people were taking helicopters and whatever it was and watching what they were doing. And you don't need building permits, by the way, in all these counties. So they just put this thing in, never told anybody. And the workers were commuting from Carson City. They're out there. And the first thing you do is go out and try to find them. So the attraction program is pretty obvious. You're trying to recruit companies, and you do this in the sales manner and determine what you have to sell, and that's your community assets, not your quality of life, but your asset. Identify who wants to buy them, your target study, repeatedly over a long period of time. Try to get companies to move here. Now, this is expensive, it takes time, but it has to be done. Then your startup program basically is you grow new ones. You grow new companies. I'm going to guess that most of your existing companies here, many of them started here, and then eventually over a period of time grew. And this requires a facility, a building. It requires a team to teach them. So, what we have to, what I am recommending you do, you create the I-40 Midwest Tennessee Economic Development Corporation. These 4 counties, the reason why is they are economically linked, they are socially linked, and geographically linked. These counties over here, Humphreys and Perry, their commuting trend is easterly. These are all together. It's really a nice link. Set this up, have two professionals, one full-time professional dedicated to existing industry. The annual cost of this is about $425,000. Your initial funding should be by the 4 counties. I did some calculations at $3.50 per capita would raise roughly $300,000. The balance for the first year or so, second, third, fourth year, would be grants and private sector contributions. Your private sector will increase. It will increase over time, and these are not 100-hour contributors. You don't want to accept less than $5,000. It should be $10,000 contributors. Because this is not a membership organization. This is but that many communities that have grown. I know a county down in Florida takes in, the county's 250,000 people. They take in roughly 250,000 of private sector contributions. The 8th is an available trained workforce. Now, this is the second most important issue relative to economic development and economic growth, is the availability of trained or trainable labor. When we look at this wage skill ladder I talked about, the $65,000 employer comes in. When these folks climb this wage skill ladder, they need training. They may jump from the 45 to here, but every step on this ladder requires training to provide the value of the worker to the employer. And communities that provide that training in an expeditious manner are the most competitive and most successful local economies. The reason why is that this is vital to an employer, your existing employers and the new ones that move in. So when we look at this regional workforce, I mentioned it's 42,000 people who went through the examination. Do you have labor available? And when we look at this, there are about 8,000 individuals today traveling a long distance to Madison and Gibson counties. What employers look for is what's called intercepting labor. They will look at commuting patterns and they will say, ooh, look at all the people going that way. And they will drop the facility between the two. It's called intercepting labor. And there's a great deal of labor, likely high skilled, that can be intercepted. By the way, you have to prove to a company you have a workforce. You just can't say, oh, we'll get the workers. You have to prove to them they can get workers before they begin to build a facility. So we need to have basically a regional workforce training program. The 4 counties can afford to do it. Not one single county can. Number 8, 9, an abundant supply of approved industrial real estate. Economic development is ultimately a real estate transaction. The most important issue relative to the site selection process is having an actual site. Now, this is the single most important thing. It's called product and people. Those are the 2 things that drive an economy. Product is land and buildings. Mostly land, greenfield industrial property. If you don't have it, you're done. You're out. The absence of approved industrial property, your existing companies cannot expand and will have to move away. New companies can't come there. Over time, the existing facilities will become unusable, and once again, your existing companies will have to move away, and the economy will stop growing and will decline. Approved meaning that all the site preparation has to be done. Utilities, roads, sewer, water, electric, everything is there, and all government approvals on zoning and land use planning have been accomplished to the point that you can award a building permit upon 90 days of application. If you are not approved, you are not considered as a community. The way the site selection process works, and Blake is here from the state, will confirm this. State will get an inquiry and we need 50 acres. They will go through an inventory of communities and the site selection If you don't have 50 acres, you're not on the list. And you will never get on the list. If you don't have 10 acres of what they need, you won't get on the list. And you will never get on the list. It is the absolute driving force. I was, how many have been to Clearwater, St. Petersburg, Florida? Oh, yeah. Pinellas County, about 950,000 people. It's a peninsula. It's densely populated for a Florida county. But they asked me, the county commission asked me to do a study. Said, what is the economic impact of Pinellas County of not having any greenfield industrial property? Now, Pinellas County through the 1990s to the year 2000 had one of the best track records. They created almost 30,000 high-wage primary jobs in Pinellas County. You wouldn't know it because you go to the beach, but this is it. Raymond James is headquartered there. They got more medical equipment manufacturers in Pinellas County than any county in the state of Florida. Just a tremendous thing. So I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at how built up they are, and I did the prediction. I said, look, you got like 40 acres left. I said, you have to start tearing down stuff, you have to start doing this to create industrial property. And then they run into a real problem. A company called Nielsen Marketing. You know the Nielsen TV stuff? Nielsen Marketing is a big company. They do a lot of marketing research. They're headquartered in Pinellas County. They have to do a major expansion. They need about 50 to 80 acres of land to do it. They're being recruited by Atlanta. They're being recruited by everybody. They're getting these huge incentive packages because there's no land in Pinellas County. Finally, a local utility company said, hey, look, we've got 70 acres of surplus property located here. We'll sell you that. And Nielsen stayed. They built a nice campus, had 3,500 people working there. But if they hadn't had that, they would have lost Nielsen Marketing. There's nothing more important than industrial real estate. So we look at the power of the region, and I recommend, I see this opportunity. When I first saw your geography, and when the mayor called me and said, hey, look, we'd like to have you take a look at this area, I said, what a wonderful opportunity. This area has opportunity because of Interstate 40. It's the single biggest asset that you have is Interstate 40. And I know what other communities have done. And I am recommending that at this location, you put in what's called the I-40 Midwest Tennessee Enterprise Center. Now this should be located at exit 126. The reason why, any further east, and you lose the labor from Carroll and Henderson County, any further west, you'll lose the labor from other counties. And the key to that location is that it's within 35 minutes of your labor supply. You should encumber roughly 3,500 acres, develop roughly 500 acres initially. It is within a 35-minute drive of 110,000 people. I want to go back just real quick. For this, we include Humphreys and Perry County. The reason why is if you go ahead and these four counties build this thing, workers from Humphreys and Perry are going to use it. Plus, we divide the cost up among 6 counties for this. It adds the population, then grows the marketable population for this park to 110,000 people. This is the location for your regional community college and worker training center, and it'll be the location for other regional facilities. You want to get your picture before I change the slide? What I'm going to do, all this is in the plan, by the way, the written plan. But I would supply the mayor or the committee with most of these slides so that if you want to do your own roadshow. So we look at the marketplace. Well, this is a big project. Is everybody going to use it? I've studied the marketplace for a lot of different communities, a lot of different reasons. And I've recently, over the last 6 months, done some significant research into what will be the expanding industrial sectors over the next 10 to 20 years that communities should go after that will be primary in nature and pay a wage high enough to improve their local economy. I identified 20 industrial sectors, 12 of them are manufacturing. And people, whoa, manufacturing is dead, it ain't gonna grow. It's called advanced manufacturing. You know, they're making microprocessors thinner than the toilet paper you find at this exit, rest stop exit on I-40. They are making computers the size of a thumbnail. Technology has overwhelmed virtually everything that we do in life, and it is significantly and has been influencing manufacturing process. Manufacturing has embraced technology. In the 50s and 60s, manufacturing was in the industrial Northeast and Midwest. In the 70s and 80s, it moved to the South because of high wages and the labor unions. It began to move offshore in the late mid-1980s because of the invention of the shipping container, and they took advantage of the cheap labor in foreign countries. It is now undergoing an organic change, and that organic change is machines are doing the work, people are doing less, but the people who are doing it are better educated, more sophisticated. Consequently, these companies are now driven by technology in their site selection process. They have a huge capital investment. There are fewer but better educated workers. They need large tracts of land. They need an abundant, inexpensive supply of energy and a multimodal transportation system. So, in Clay County, Mississippi, Yokohama Tire has completed 1 million feet of their 4 million square foot factory that they're building to make tires. That factory, when finished with their 4 million feet, will have 2,500 workers. In Akron, Ohio, in 1975, 4 million square feet would have needed 20,000 workers. Okay, that's it. So there is a marketplace, and this marketplace will go on. It began about 10 years ago. I could see it happening. The relocation and construction of sophisticated, expensive factories. It will go on for the next 15 years. And communities that have the facilities, the sites, the workforce, the community colleges to teach and train these workers can take advantage of this. Let's take a look at Lowndes County. The mayor spoke about this. This is Columbus, Mississippi. Population of Lowndes County, 60,000 people. In the 90s, their principal employer economic contributor was the Columbus Air Force Base. They went through the BRAC, the Base Realignment Program. They almost got closed. That's what a chill down the spine of the individuals in that community. If we lose the Air Force Base, we don't have a county anymore. What are we going to do? Well, we better get an active economic development program going. Well, how do we do that? First thing we do is we need land. And so they constructed a 1,500-acre community-owned industrial park. And they opened this up roughly in the year 2000. And then nothing happened. Year went by, 2 years went by, 3 years went by, nothing happened. Now, did everybody get whine and cry? Did they blame people? Did they get mad? Why in the world did we do this now? They added 1,500 more acres, maybe a 3,000-acre park. And then guess what? Along came Severstal Steel, now Steel Dynamics, took 1,200 acres. Initial investment, $1.5 billion. They just added another $1 billion to it. They consume 1,200 acres. They have about 900 workers there. Average wage is $90,000 a year. From that point then, Stark Aerospace comes in. Packard Diesel Engines takes down 400 acres. Airbus Helicopters moved in, and several others. Here's Yokohama Tire, a 4 million square foot plant. This is 1 million square feet sitting there right now. One of the most successful communities. Their community industrial park now is 7,500 acres. So, what do we have to do? We need, in 2020, to create an economic development organization as soon as possible. Employ professional staff, initiate the existing industry program, create a land inventory, begin the process of building the economic development structure. Now, in 2021, begin a general plan for the Enterprise Center. Begin the process for the widening of 641 and implement the workforce training program. With 4 counties, this can be done. By the way, that workforce training program is designed based upon the input from the existing industry program. Create an ownership structure of the property for the Enterprise Center, begin working with the state to establish a community college. That would be a regional for basically the 6 counties involved in this. By joining together 6 counties, I don't know your state law, but I know that 3 of the 4 counties have a branch office from a community college. This has a population base and will have an industrial base enough to support its own. And we'll ask our state legislatures to make sure we do this. Construction of the first phase of the Enterprise Center should begin in 2023. Initiate the marketing plan, begin the process of funding the community college located there. 2024, the first phase of development of the Enterprise Center should be completed. Then we have a full marketing program. Construction of the community college will begin. So at this point, let's just take a short break, about 10 minutes. I know we had coffee. But then we're going to come back, and then we're going to open this up for a discussion to talk about, because I couldn't cover everything in here, to talk about what parts of it you like, you don't like, and what we want to proceed, how we're going to proceed in the future. So let's take about a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at roughly 10 o'clock.